Fantasy Booktube, I have a confession to make. I don't really like the original First Law Trilogy.
What?
The First Law Trilogy by Joe Abercrombie hit the world by storm in the early 2000s. It is credited, depending on who you talk to, with either inventing or infusing energy into a particular kind of grimdark tale. And Abercrombie is without doubt one of the leading names in modern fantasy literature.
I don't know how to put this, but I'm kind of a big deal.
And at least this initial trilogy, I just don't jive with. Now, this distinction probably won't mean a lot for those who are going to be mad at this video, but I didn't hate the First Law. This is not a rant review, like my Lies of La Clamora feelings. Oof. But I didn't love First Law. I had some pretty major problems with it. But this, of course, is one of the seminal works in modern fantasy. If you look at r/Reddit's top fantasy novels, I think these are like number 2 or number 3, really high up there.
I'm very important. I have many leather-bound books, and my apartment smells of rich mahogany.
And so in a similar way to my Stormlight Archive reviews, I want to kind of dig a little deeper into some of the criticisms I have to add to a discussion that I don't think has been had much in this particular area. One other quick caveat is that I actually really, for the most part, enjoy Abercrombie's standalones, and I'm actively reading his new trilogy, The Age of Madness, which is already, in my view, much better than the original. So this is certainly not like forever shade upon Abercrombie. This is just with this particular work, I have some problems. So let's talk about the First Law Trilogy. There are spoilers of these first 3 books, but if you haven't read this by now, you probably aren't going to read it. Let's be honest with yourself. 3 books make up the First Law Trilogy: The Blade Itself, The Last Argument of Kings, and Before They Are Hanged. And first off, huge positive, Joe Abercrombie can name a book. Even with all of his new ones, I just think they're fascinating and great. The Blade Itself is actually a quote from Homer in the Iliad, or is it the Odyssey? I think it's the Odyssey, actually. And they're so evocative, so original. First compliment. Great book names. It was actually very interesting making this summary of the trilogy because the overall story becomes much more clear after you've read the 3rd one. And before that, it's hard to kind of put everything in its place. So this was also just like a fun exercise in itself. But the basics of the world of First Law is there's something called the Circle of the World. That's kind of the map of the world. And in the middle of this, there's something called the Union, which is, just like it sounds, this large unified nation that is really the central military power, or one of the central military powers of the world. And then in the north, there's just an area called the North, where there are kind of like Viking, barbarian-like tribes who are always warring. And then in the south, there's an empire called Gurkle. Is that right? Gurkle? I'm pretty proud that I remember that. The Gurkish Empire, which kind of was the powerful empire for a long time and is sort of waning, although at the time of this book, they're sort of a resurrection in the south of their strength. And all of these world politics are really about 2 warring, not all powerful, but very powerful magi. One is Baez, who controls sort of the Union side of things and what happens in the north, although he has his tentacles everywhere. And then there is Khalul, who is in control of most of what happens in the southern, the Gurkish Empire. And this sort of larger, literal centuries-old conflict is reflected in the modern geopolitical conflict that our main characters are a part of. And let's talk about those main characters, because anyone that you talk to about First Law is going to mention the character work of Abercrombie as being central to why they love this book, or these series of books. There are 3 main perspectives, although there's some other POVs in the books. The 3 main perspectives are Logan Ninefingers, also known as the Bloody Nine, who is in the north, is a barbarian war leader who is absolutely the best fighter in the north, and he, when he gets into this battle situation, almost has an alter ego that takes over and is just like immensely violent, and he wins lots of fights. And at the beginning, he is sort of ostracized from the North as it's unifying into a single tribe to face the Union, and he wanders for a lot of the book and try to kind of find his identity and not wanting to be his violent self. 2, there is Giselle. What's his last name? Giselle Don Luther. Is it Giselle? Giselle? I think Giselle. Let's go with Giselle Dan Luther, who is a nobleman, cocky young man who is training for a big fencing tournament in Adua, which is the capital of the Union. And our third is, I believe his first name, Sandar Den Glokta. Glokta. That's harder to say out loud than I thought it was going to be. Glokta is a very unique character. He is with the Inquisition, which is just like how it sounds, basically the secret police of the Union. They murder, torture. He himself is a torturer in His Majesty's Inquisition, and he will uncover and recover several mysteries throughout the 3 trilogies. And it is in the experience of these 3 men that we see this overarching conflict between the Gurkish Empire and Kulul and the Union forces and Bayaz, along with some shindigs that happen in the north. And that's the trilogy. There's some other POVs that become necessary or not necessary at various points in the books. Some of the standouts there are Colum West, who is this commoner who is rising in the military ranks because of he's actually a good soldier, and he often conflicts with the nobility because they are ineffectual, but because of their names, they have to be given military titles. Pharaoh, who is basically a southerner who we find out has some sort of demon blood or devil blood, which allows her to have some sort of access to this supernatural realm. She's also wanting revenge for something that happened in her past. And then we have another southerner, the Dog Man, who is, we're given his POV a couple of times to help us follow action in the north when Logan Ninefingers is not in a place to tell us about it and kind of keep us up to date there. Those are primarily the POVs you get in the 3 books. Now, I want to start out with positives because, like I said, while I don't love this series, I don't hate it. I like it. I tried to reread it for this review, and I only got through the Blade itself, and some of the struggles I had, I just were reminded of and didn't really want to finish. I wanted to put my time into Abercrombie books that I hadn't read. But positives. 1, without doubt, Abercrombie is a good writer. He has a very clear, distinct voice that doesn't get overly purple, but also always gives you a sense of place, always gives you a sense of character of the person that you are reading the perspective of, and without doubt has unique ideas in the fantasy realm. On that same level, Abercrombie absolutely defies genre expectations, which for a really defined genre like medieval fantasy, it's really refreshing when someone has the capacity to foil our expectations, and it gives us a sense of excitement as we're reading it. Abercrombie does that really, really well, like George R. R. Martin did in A Song of Ice and Fire, where you truly don't know exactly what is going to happen or how it's going to happen, or even if the storytelling is leading you in a way that you shouldn't be thinking, or you're really kept on the edge of your feet as a reader. Abercrombie is also excellent at action sequences, which is a skill that not a lot of fantasy authors have. It's very hard to tell an extended action sequence without either the reader getting bored or confused at what is happening, and Abercrombie never does either. That extends, by the way, to his description of places where non-combat is happening. You normally have a pretty good idea of what the surroundings of any given scene is like. You feel it, you smell it, and he's very good at drawing a picture of where you are. All right, and now to the critiques and really where I get down to maybe what I can add in a unique way to this discussion. Because while Abercrombie's characters are what a lot of people find interesting about this original First Law Trilogy, they simply don't work on me. I find particularly the 3 main POVs that we are in for the majority of these books to be pretty repetitive and one note.
What?
So that's Glokta, Logan Ninefingers, and Giselle. Those 3 are all versions of a know-it-all asshole.
I knew it. I'm surrounded by assholes.
Maybe having one of your 3 or even 2 of your 3 be know-it-all assholes or sure of themselves or very knowledgeable or pig-headed or whatever you want to say. Maybe you can get by. But all 3 of the main characters it just gets exhausting after a while to me as a reader. And in fact, one of the points where I really lost steam in the first Blade, which is near the end, where the new character, Firo, is introduced. And she's, again, the same kind of character. She is full of herself, cocky, know-it-all, judges everyone around her. And I found that exhausting. And I didn't want to stay with those characters very long. I wanted to really drill down on this. So I looked up early interactions that all three of these characters have with other people and other characters. And I just want to read them back to back to back to kind of show you what I felt as I noticed this all while I was reading it. Just like every room they walk into, they judge, they know it all, they feel superior to everyone who's around them. And there's a bit of a spectrum because Giselle does this in this like young, hasn't seen really hardship in the world kind of way. On the other end of the spectrum is like Logan, who has seen a lot of hardship, but he still thinks he always knows best. And then Glatka is just like always judging everyone around him 100% of the time. So here, I just want to read these. The first one is from Logan Nine Fingers. I had to go a little deeper into the book. I'm like 15% in, according to my Kindle here. I had to go a little further because, as readers will know, for the first like third of this book, Logan is basically on his own. So this is when he's talking to Baez. He meets him for the first time, and then Calder, one of the king's sons, or one of the new kings of the North sons, comes, and this is from Logan's perspective. Bear with me, this is a little long. Was it Calder or Scale? They're both something sour. The younger one, I reckon. And then we are into the mind of Logan. Calder, then, that was something. Either one was bad, but Scale was much worse. Both together were an experience to be avoided. Baez seemed to consider a moment. Prince Calder may enter, but his men must remain beyond the bridge. Yes, sir, beyond the bridge. The gatekeeper wheezed away. He'd love that, would Calder. Logan was greatly tickled by the thought of the so-called prince screaming uselessly through that little slot. Later on, Calder comes in, and he says, so you've been taken to keeping dogs, have you, Baez? I'd watch this one, to Logan. He's been known to bite his master's hand. His lip curled. I could put him down for you if you'd like. Logan shrugged. Hard words are for fools and cowards. Calder might have been both, but Logan was neither. If you mean to kill, you'd better get right to it than talking about it. Talk only makes the other man ready, and that's the last thing you want. So Logan said nothing. Calder could take that for weakness if he pleased, and so much the better. Fights might find Logan depressingly often, but he was long, long past looking for them. So again, this is the most, I think, likable of our three main perspectives, but still you can see there in the sizing up and the way that he takes informations, Logan is always sure of his judgments and makes them quickly and always has in his mind the right way to do things. Now don't take that, I know the character of Nine Fingers struggles very internally with his identity and who he is, but the way he looks at the world is still very, judgmental. He's sure of what he knows. And again, that might not be bad if he was the only one to do it, but he is the least of these three in this department. Let's talk about Glatka. So this is from kind of a famous scene early on called Questions, which introduces Glatka to us while he is starting to start the process, I guess, of torturing someone else. I could go through a lot of different things that he says to the torturer, where he's very belittling and judges this guy. But I think it becomes very apparent when he goes to his superior. And this is what happens. I think his name is Colleen, is the name of the superior. So he amused himself with the thought of Colleen's head mounted above the fireplace instead of that fierce animal's, while the superior ranted at him. He's every bit like his fireplace, the big dolt. Looks impressive, but there's not much going on underneath. I wonder how he'd respond to an interrogation. I'd start with those ridiculous side whiskers. But Glatka's face was a mask of attention and respect. Well, you've outdone yourself this time, Glatka. You mad cripple. When the mercers find out about this, they'll have you flayed. I've tried flaying. It tickles. Damn it, keep your mouth shut and smile. Where's that whistling fool Savard? I'll have him flayed when I get out of here. Oh yes, that's good. Very good, Glatka. There's a lot of examples of Glatka, but he is just always sure of himself, just like there. He's nothing. He's a big dolt. There's nothing behind there. He goes to the king. The king's dumb and an idiot. Everyone on the closed council is an idiot. He always knows best, Glatka. And I find that tiring. And the worst is Giselle. And listen, it is a trope to have a young prince or a young noble who's too sure of himself be humbled. But he is a lot. There's so many examples. I'm just going to use the easiest one, which is how we are introduced to him as a character. We're introduced to him playing cards with a bunch of fellow soldiers, some who are part of the like commanders and officer corps and some who are not. And literally like the first couple pages are Giselle going around the circle and judging everyone that sits in front of him. I mean, it's obviously a choice by Abercrombie to present him this way. All of these are intentional choices. I'm not saying this is that Abercrombie didn't mean to do this. I'm just saying that as a reader, I don't love reading this for 500 pages 3 times. So here's the example. Giselle half sat, half lay back on his bench with one leg stretched out. Major West had rocked his chair so far back its hind legs that he looked in imminent danger of tipping over entirely. He was holding his glass up to the sun, admiring the way that the light flickered through the amber spirit inside. He had a faint, mysterious smile which seemed to say, I am not a nobleman, and maybe your social inferior, but I won a contest in the king's favor on the battlefield, and that makes me the better man, so you children will damn well do as I say. He was out of his hand, though, and in Giselle's opinion, far too cautious with his money. Lieutenant Caspa was sitting forward, frowning and scratching his sandy beard, staring intently at his cards as though they were sums he didn't understand. He was a good-humored young man, but an oaf of a card player, and was always most apprehensive when Giselle bought him drinks with his own money. Still, he could well afford to lose it. Giselle had often observed that ever so slightly stupid will act more stupidly in clever company. Having lost the high ground already, they scramble eagerly for the position of likable idiot. Stay out of arguments, they will only lose, and can hence be everyone's friend. Caspa's look of baffled concentration seemed to say, I am not clever, but honest and likable, which is much more important. Cleverness is overrated. Oh, and I'm very, very rich, so everyone likes me regardless. And then literally, like, he goes around and around and around that table and judges people. Could just be a taste thing, but I find it one note.
How many assholes we got on this ship anyhow?
And as I said, the voice that Abercrombie gives is incredibly distinct, even between those 3 characters that I just read from and gave experts from. But they're all of the same flavor. And I just don't love that flavor if it's always going to be that flavor. It needs to be mixed in with other things, in my opinion. Also, a lot of people will say about these 3 main characters that it is amazing that Abercrombie makes them likable or makes you sympathize with them, when for the most part, they're quite terrible. Probably the most extreme example is Glocta, who is like one of the worst villains in any fantasy story, the Torturer, who his whole job is to torture people. Like I mentioned George R.R. Martin before, one of like the worst characters even in that terrible world is the Tickler, who is the mountain's torturer, right? And that's who Glocta is. And there's a strength of Abercrombie that he is subverting our expectations for what a hero can be, and I understand why some people like that. But I find that there's a bit of a cheat with Glocta. And that is that we never actually see, and someone please tell me if this is wrong, we never actually see Glocta performing the torture. We hear about it either before or after, or sometimes he gets away with not torturing them because he tricks people. But I don't think there is a scene where Glocta is with his hands performing horrible acts just to cause pain in innocent people. One thing I forgot to say that is also crucial is Glocta doesn't torture anyone that we as the reader care about. One of the reasons that the character work in something like Game of Thrones is so good, especially in the character of Jaime, is because he starts out causing immense pain to a lot of characters we love and respect in the Starks. So his redemption has to be really earned by good writing, and that's why I think it's a better use of that redemption of a lost character than in First Law and Glocta. It would be very difficult to root for Glocta if we were actually able to see his worst qualities. And in many ways, we just hear about them and they're not visceral to us, which is just a tad bit, in my opinion, of a cheat in character building. And in fact, I think, as I said, each of these 3 characters has one of those. Glocta, we never see him actually torture someone. Logan, when we are in his head, he is Logan Nine Fingers. He is not the Bloody Nine. And he's very much portrayed in this trilogy as kind of an Incredible Hulk character.
I know, it's crazy. I'm wearing shirts now.
Where when he's angry or when he gets into violence, this alter ego takes over. And it's even portrayed that way, especially I think in the 3rd book. Like the Bloody Nine takes over and Logan is no longer in control. That gives us as the reader a chance to pardon all of the bad things that Logan has done. Because it's not really him, it's sort of his alter ego. The same thing with Giselle is I don't think anyone who reads this really likes Giselle. But the reader is given some subtle hints that Giselle is all right underneath. particularly in the first book, they really, Abercrombie really has to work for you to cheer for this guy. And he does it by having other, better, more likable characters be friends for unknown reasons with Giselle. Specifically, Colum West and R.D. West, both of the Wests, are sort of made to prop Giselle up in our reading, or at least that's how my reading experience happened. So while, yes, it is interesting that these three characters are worse than most heroes we have, there is some trickery in the writing that, once noticed for me, let Abercrombie really let these characters get away with the consequences of their actions. And I think that leads to less powerful theme, which I will talk about in a little bit, and overall a not as compelling for me characters that those three could have been if we really had to deal with what they had done, and their characters have had to deal with what they had done. And speaking of R.D. West, I do have to mention, so this is Colum West's little sister who falls in love with Giselle and eventually is the love interest for Glocta, or love interest might be strong, marriage prospect for Glocta in the third book. And R.D. West is without doubt a manic pixie dream girl.
When did you first suspect you were dating a manic pixie dream girl?
Everything seemed so perfect at first. You know, she was cute, but quirky and awkward.
She listens to the Smiths.
They all listen to the Smiths.
Okay.
Manic pixie dream girl is a term that was coined, I think, in the late 2000s for a female side character who has like quirky, weird, sort of not like the other girl characteristics, and who exists to, in some ways, prop up a male protagonist or to teach him something, or in some way to help a narrative involving a male protagonist while not receiving anything in return. And R.D. West is that not just for one main character, but for two main characters. In the first book, the love romantic story with Giselle is, I think, quite clearly to fill out Giselle as a character. He is an asshole who doesn't care about anything. He just honestly doesn't even care about his fencing. He is just this prim, proud nobleman with really no features. But he meets R.D. West, and she inspires him to be good at dueling, and then he becomes the best at dueling. And then she inspires him to be, you know, like he wants to be a good man, a great man who can marry this girl and you know, like have some good qualities, I guess. And then he has to go off on this quest, and they're never like able to totally recover their relationship. And then when they aren't able to recover their relationship, R.D. West gives like confidence to Glocta that he can have a life outside of just his like mopey existence. And she props up Glocta as a character and gives him back his ambition and gives him back his drive, and ultimately marries him when he thinks he is unlovable or unmarriable or like he has nothing good inside of him, and gives him like this hero's ending. But she doesn't really get, in fact, she's treated quite poorly throughout the whole thing by both men, some on purpose, some not on purpose. But we're never given her POV. We're never given her perspective. And that's a problem for me. I think that hopefully if Abercrombie did it again, he would do that better. But I think it's quite noticeably sore in the first three books. And all of this adds up to, I think, what is the ultimate critique I would have of these books is that I think the theme is thin. I don't really know what the themes of this book are. Like, what is it trying to say? What is this portraying? I did some searching on like Reddit forums and other YouTube videos. Like I watched other YouTubers that I really like who love these books, and like the most I got was like, yeah, sometimes the world is messy. And to me, that's not really a theme. I mean, that's just like, I don't know. Like, is he trying to like get at nihilism? Like,
man, they were nihilists, man. Huh? They kept saying they believe in nothing.
I actually do think I was thinking about specifically nihilism and like how this compares to First Law, because I actually do like a lot of nihilistic works. Specifically, like two that came to mind: The Stranger by Albert Camus, which is one of my favorite novellas ever, and No Country for Old Men, directed and written by the Coen brothers, and actually several other movies I could have gone to that were written and directed by the Coen brothers that mostly explore nihilism, but do so, I think, in a much more effective and thoughtful way. I mean, The Stranger has strong elements of existentialism, where just everything that the main character is going through, you feel lost and without purpose. And you understand how that sort of view can drive this character to do things that are at the same time sad, hopeless, thoughtless, and meaningless, and yet that he is attaching some sort of meaning to them. It's an expert work, specifically in the existentialism of a nihilistic viewpoint. And that's why I really like that book. It's you get this in like 90 pages. No Country for Old Men is the same way, sort of the capricious chance of the universe portrayed, but with a really likable main character in Lowen who has this love for his wife, and that's what's driving him to make a series of terrible decisions about what to do with this drug money that he has found. And Anton Chigurh is one of the greatest villain characters, using a very small amount of screen time to get across this just chaotic evil that he is portraying. Like, again, fleshes out a world where really we don't really know why things particularly happen, but also how individuals find meaning within it. And I just didn't get that in the First Law. I mean, a lot of the endings of our main characters and the story itself feels very much like subversion just for subversion's sake. All three of our main characters sort of get what they want, but also mostly have tragic endings that feel at times pretty forced. Spoilers I already said, but Giselle being the king at the end feels very forced and sort of out of left field. There's just like no rhyme or reason. I don't know. That really felt like, what? Logan Ninefingers dies violently, which is something that he was trying to change forever about himself. They didn't want to get into another violent life, and then of course he dies in this violent scrap in the north, or it seems like he dies in this violent scrap in the north, and Glokta basically rises to be head of the Inquisition, but he is also going to be this puppet of Bayaz, who I guess he sort of is the one person that Glokta can respect. I mean, all of that just felt, I don't know, hollow. The third book really feels hollow to me, and not in a meaningful way. Just going to be honest, not in a meaningful way. While we're talking about subversion, the one subversion that I really did like is the whole seed thing, where they had to go to the ends of the earth to find this magical seed, and actually it was all like a diversion. I actually did love that. That was in the second one. Like, that is the right amount of subversion that I think was just both funny and like tragic, but had like some real like to it at the end. I was quite surprised when it happened, and did like that. So we'll end on a positive there. At the end of the day, this first trilogy is good, not great. Like I said, it didn't stop me from reading the standalones. Best Served Cold is great. The Heroes is very fun, and Red Country might be my favorite of his. So I've continued on with the First Law, but I had to get these thoughts out because it will not make my top 10. It probably won't make my top 20 fantasy series of all time because of the consistent tone that I find grating, along with some other things. So let me know what you think about First Law. I know a lot of people out there are going to love it and won't love my criticisms of it, and that's fine. That's what BookTube is for. And I'll continue reading Abercrombie, and I'm very curious to see what you guys think of my critiques. As always, please like and subscribe. First in, last out.